Hey everybody, Grumbles here with another simulator battle video, and in this video I fly the BF-110 C-4 over Stalingrad. The BF-110 is one of those planes I always wanted to make a video about, since it is an iconic fighter with a lot of history, but never really got around to doing it. So let's take a look at the BF-110 and talk a little bit about the plane before we look at some engagements in it. Now, the BF-110 is of course a heavy fighter called Zerstörer or Destroyer by the Luftwaffe. Nowadays the BF-110 often has a bit of a bad reputation, which is not entirely deserved in my opinion. But when it was first designed and initially entered service, it was supposed to be the primary offensive fighter of the Luftwaffe, escorting bombers on long-range missions, and was getting a lot of the most experienced pilots assigned to it, while the BF-109 with its short range was seen mostly as a defensive interceptor. The BF-110 was supposed to use its high speed and good armament in high-speed attacks, preferably from above, and then use its speed to get away again, in a typical slashing attack. Now, some might chuckle a bit at hearing BF-110 and high speed in the same sentence, but by the time the plane was designed and entered service, it was among the fastest fighter planes in service at the time, thanks to its for its time high-powered DB601 engines. As a matter of fact, it was significantly faster than what most air forces had in service in early 1939. And it was of course also much faster than the early BF-109s with Humo engines, and a number of those were still in service at the start of World War II. And the early campaigns of World War II did little to taint the plane's reputation at the time, since the BF-110 would still run mostly into fighter opposition that was slower and could therefore be defeated by a well-employed BF-110. With only a few French fighters like the T-520 being faster and not by much. The Hawker Hurricane or P-36 Hawk were still slower, and the more powerful Spitfire was held back for the defense of Britain. However, during the Battle of Britain, the flaws of the destroyer concept as long-range escort fighters became apparent when the BF-110 started to run into larger numbers of modern single-engine fighters in form of the Spitfire, which was both faster as well as of course way more maneuverable than the BF-110, so it could easily outmaneuver the BF-110 as well as catch it when it tries to run. Something that from that point on would be the case for all newer single-engine fighters, which, unlike the ones the BF-110 mostly ran into in the earlier campaigns, now also had high-performance engines as well as refined aerodynamics. Matters were made worse during the Battle of Britain by the fact that both the BF-109 as well as the BF-110 were often employed in a completely wrong way. With bombers having higher casualties as expected, the escort fighters were ordered to fly close escort, staying right next to the bombers at their low speed. That of course is just about the worst idea you can come up with if you are talking about fighters that were designed for high-speed slashing attacks, with a comparatively high wing loading. A BF-109 being attacked in such a situation from above could still try to dive away and outrun a attacking Spitfire. A BF-110 not so much, and as a result the casualties were very high. The rear gunner did not help a lot either, and in hindsight the BF-110 would have certainly done better if it would have been designed without a rear gunner in the first place, saving space and weight, like on the B-38 Lightning. But it wasn't, and as a result the BF-110 later was taken off escort duty and mostly employed in other roles: close air support, intercepting bombers, which were at the time still unescorted, and night fighting. And in those roles the BF-110 did fairly well and was produced in high numbers till the end of the war. Now, despite its failure during the Battle of Britain, I consider the BF-110 to be the most capable in air-to-air combat among heavy fighters with such a layout, meaning twin-engine, multi-crew fighter with a tail gunner. That of course excludes the B-38, since it is a single-seat fighter. Though the 110 is of course not as good at it as a single-engine fighter would be. Let's look at some characteristics of the plane. The one we have in game is the C-4. It is an earlier version, and the first with the old MG-FF replaced with the newer MG-FFM, firing the more capable mine shell. At the time of Stalingrad this version was outdated, but still in limited service on the Eastern Front. The newer E version at the time had slightly more powerful engines and was a bit heavier and better armored, and could carry more payload, but was otherwise similar to the C-4. The later G models had the much stronger DB605 engines, just like the BF-109G, and newer MG151 cannons, but that also added quite a bit of weight. Now, Messerschmitt always was a huge proponent of lightweight designs, and as a result the BF-110, while it is a large plane with 3 seats and a tail gunner, as well as for the time heavy armament, is not that heavy. The C-4 version has a loaded weight of about 6.7 tons, and while heavy in comparison with a single-engine fighter, that's pretty light for a heavy fighter in this layout. In comparison, that's almost 1.5 tons lighter than a B-38, about 2 lighter than a BE-3 heavy fighter, and a good 3 tons lighter than a Bristol bow fighter. More importantly though, the BF-110 is quite a bit faster than a Beaufighter or a PS-3, and higher speed means better in air-to-air combat. Though Beaufighters were of course also not used as daylight escort fighters, they entered service as night fighters and then as ground attack planes and other roles, but not as a daylight fighter like the BF-110 was in its early life. Also, the relatively light weight of the BF-109 means its wing loading is also not that high, about 173 kg per square meter. That is higher than a BF-109E or Spitfire of course, but lower than some later single-engine fighters. In case of Stalingrad, that would specifically be the LA-5 and the MiG-3. And in the right circumstances, the BF-110 can turn after them, though it will lose speed fast doing so. Now, despite that, those planes are of course still way more maneuverable than a BF-110 with their much better roll rate and energy retention in maneuvers, but not all pilots seem to remember that their plane has ailerons too. Still, most planes the BF-110 will meet over Stalingrad outperform it in air-to-air combat, but the BF-110 has a few tricks up its sleeves too. For example, it has very nice hammerheads which can be used to surprise opponents, and while the heavy BF-110 loses speed fast in maneuvers, that can also be used to draw them in and force an overshoot. But most importantly, the BF-110 benefits a lot from teamwork. Now, that is true for most planes, but this is especially important in ones that are slower and less maneuverable than the opposition, but have a very good armament. Two or more BF-110s covering each other can do surprisingly well, using their heavy armament to shoot opponents off the tail of the other. Here, the higher resilience to damage of the larger twin-engine BF-110 compared to single-engine fighters comes in handy too. Somewhat similar to how Wildcats fought Zeros in the earlier days of the Pacific War. Other than that, you want of course be careful in the BF-110 and attack with an altitude advantage whenever you can. At low altitude, the plane loses energy fast as it can't trade altitude for speed in maneuvers. So, that's a quick overview of the plane. Let's take a look at a few engagements in it. All the footage in this video is from the same battle over Stalingrad, and I flew with Patrick as my wingman again. I have to mention though that lately I have some issues with my shadowplay crashing, so there are a few parts not included in the video. Well, as you can see, so far we had a few minor engagements and a few kills on lone plates here and there. Not too much action till now, but this is going to change in the not too distant future. But for now, Patrick just finished off a Lux 3 that was harassing a friendly HE-111 bomber while I was covering from above, and we're back to climbing and forming up again over Stalingrad close to the Volga. The enemy frontline airfield is just on the other side of the river, so we hope we find some more planes to shoot at soon. Only 2 minutes later though, we see a large furball forming on the other side of the river on low altitude. Now in theory that is perfect for 2 BF-110s on higher altitude. We can just fly over the dogfight and dive down and engage with our heavy armament and then soon climb back up and repeat as needed. The problem here is though that this fight is very close to the enemy frontline airfield with dangerous AA guns on it. As we close in on the action though, it seems that one group of planes is moving away from the airfield to the south, and we hope that they are far enough away that we can risk a quick diving deck on the enemy plane and then climb away again. I go in a dive after what seems to be a few enemy planes chasing a friendly plane. Sadly, they turn and get closer to the airfield again. But it's too late to change my mind now. I am already closing in on a MiG-3, so I open fire and finish it off and then climb away again. Not just from the AA fire, but from the numerous enemy planes that are around as well. Luckily they are all on lower altitude and not a threat at this point. Sadly though, we were really too close to the airfield and I take a hit from the anti-aircraft guns as I climb, and my plane goes down. Well, lesson learned, don't get too close to those things, ever. Now, after getting new planes and forming up again, we are once again over the city and moving towards a fight that developed on lower altitude on our side of the river this time. There are 3 planes over the Volga that I can see, and I'm too far away to identify them yet, but they are maneuvering against each other, so at least one of them should be enemy. And as I close in, one of them takes a hit and is going down, though I don't know if it's a friendly plane or an enemy one, so I keep closing in to attack should the plane still flying be enemy. But as I get close enough, I can see that the other 2s are friendly BF-109s, and I pull out of my dive again. However, looking around I can see another one coming in from my left. This one appears to be enemy, and I soon can recognize the typical shape of a Yak fighter, which is coming after me. I inform my wingman and start doing evasive maneuvers. The Yak follows me, but my wingman turns into me and flies straight at the Yak guns blazing and shoots a part of the enemy's plane off. Not enough for the enemy plane to go down, but he has to run with my wingman chasing after him. I turn around as it is now my turn to cover my wingman, as he is going after the enemy fighter that is fleeing towards his airfield. 2 BF-109s are also going after the damaged enemy. However, there's another enemy fighter, also a yak, coming in and going after them, so I dive after this yak. It takes me a bit of time to build up speed again, so I can't close in on the yak soon, which I assume is going after a BF-109. I inform my wingman of the threat on comms, but I can't warn the BF-109 that way, so I give warning over the chat. I'm not sure if they noticed it, however. I fire a burst on long range, more to warn the BF-109 of the danger than because I expected hits. My wingman in the meantime finishes the first yak off, and the other one goes vertical. I follow, but I have a BF-109F coming in from behind, so I get out of the way a bit to avoid the collision. The yak stalls, I don't know if by accident or on purpose, and the BF-109s pass it. My 110's bad energy retention comes in handy though in this case, since I have already bled off most of my speed and I can come around and get my nose on the stalling yak and fire a burst on it as I pass. I do some damage and the yak goes down. There seem to be no other enemy fighters around at this point, so me and my wingman form up again and climb, heading slowly back over the river, while looking for other targets. We just climbed to about 1500 meters and are patrolling along the river as we climb, but then we can spot another bigger fight going on to the east of us, pretty close to where the enemy frontline airfield used to be. Thankfully though, our bombers have destroyed that by now, so we can engage enemy planes in this area without fear of super strong AAA. So we dive towards this furball, building up speed as we go. My wingman is slower and going for an enemy plane on lower altitude, and I'm a bit behind to cover, though I'm a bit further away than I should be in this situation. There are quite a few enemy planes in the area, and I keep an eye on my squadmate's BF-110 as he closes in on the furball. I can spot another plane arriving at the fight, diving in from altitude, but I'm not sure if it is enemy or friendly. Could be both. I warn my wingman about it, but I still can't say if the newly arrived plane is a threat. By now, my wingman has reached the fight and attacks first one plane as he flies through it and then turns after another. As he does so though, two enemy planes, yaks by the looks of it, go after him. I give a warning and close in to assist, as my wingman starts evasive maneuvers. I pull up a bit at first in case they come my way, then I can do a split S on top of them, but they turn the other way, so I push the nose back down. It seems the two planes both break off pursuit of my wingman after he does a few evasive maneuvers and turn to the left. With both of them off my wingman 6 for now, I turn after one yak and fire a quick deflection shot. I don't know if I hit though, and then go vertical again to stay above the fight. As I look down again, I can see that there is yet another plane on my wingman's tail again, so I come around again to start diving towards them again. As I bring my nose around and dive back down, I can see that it is now two enemy planes again in front of me, but as I close in, one breaks off and turns to the left. I go after the one that is still behind my squadmate. I tell him to switch direction, and as the yak does so as well to follow him, he is giving me a great shot and I open fire to finish the yak off, and then go back up in the vertical to regain some altitude. As I do so though, my wingman warns me that there's yet another enemy plane behind me now. I can't see the enemy plane, so I push the nose around and start to dive towards my wingman, which is also turning around and coming towards me, and slots in behind the enemy plane as I dive past him. The enemy plane turns out to be an IL-2 that wanted to play fighter, and my wingman is chasing it as I climb back up to give cover. After firing a burst in my direction, the IL-2 tries to get away as my wingman's BF-110 shows up behind him, but the IL-2 can't outrun the BF-110, so my wingman closes in on him and eventually finishes the IL-2 off with the BF-110's heavy armament, while I'm a bit behind and at higher altitude. Now, after the IL-2 went down, I take a look at the map and notice that we are pretty close to an enemy bomb target, and after the experience with the Airfield AA earlier, I don't want to take my chances with the AA on the bomb point, and we decide to turn around and get out of here before we get too close to it. It seems this fight is over for now anyway. However, just when I want to turn around, I notice another enemy plane coming in from behind. Looks like to be the yak I saw earlier. I start to take evasive maneuvers as my wingman closes in to assist. I can't outturn a yak, but I can try to stay out of his sights as much as possible, turning and then rolling around and changing direction just when the yak is about to get a shot. That also slows me down, which both makes it easier for my wingman to close in, as well as draw the yak in closer so that I can go for an overshoot if necessary. And the yak is almost close enough for that. My wingman is also in range by now, but before he can open fire he informs me that the yak started trying to get the shot and is going down. So with this threat taken out, we really turn around to get away from the bomb point AA and make our way back towards the Volga. We're not the only stragglers over here on our way home, it seems though. As we are flying back, I can spot two other planes fighting. It turns out to be a BF-109 chased by a Yak. They're coming my way, so I pull my nose up a bit so I can roll around to a split S and dive down after them when they pass below me. My wingman also goes after them, but he's a bit lower since he had to cool down his engines, so I'm faster gaining speed in my shallow dive, so I attack the Yak and my wingman covers me. As I only get closer slowly, I fire machine gun bursts on long range to try to get the Yak to turn, but he keeps chasing the BF-109. As I get a bit closer though, I fire another burst, and this time I get a good hit on the wingtip of the Yak, and the wingtip flies off, taking the Yak out, and we go back to climbing. As we reach altitude again, we go back to patrolling over the Volga, and after doing so for a bit, I close in on the bomber. I'm pretty sure it is a friendly HE-111, but I want to get closer to identify it for sure. It really is a HE-111, but just as I pass it and pull up again, a LA-5 dives in and attacks the bomber, and I turn around and go after the LA-5. The LA-5 pulls up and turns a bit to the left as I get closer. I don't think he has seen me yet, and as he turns around I fire a deflection shot, but I think I miss my shots, and after that I turn after the LA. Now the LA-5 is faster and it is more maneuverable, but as long as it maneuvers I can stay with him, and to outmaneuver me in this situation the LA-5 needs to use its roll rate as well. In a flat turn I can stay with it, and I can also build up speed in the dives in between, so I'm not running out of energy. Still, attacking a LA-5 in a BF-110 in this situation can be dangerous. The plane is more maneuverable and faster after all, and can get the upper hand. But this is the advantage of flying with a wingman, because while I go after the LA-5, my wingman is covering me, so should the LA-5 get the upper hand, he can take over. I chase him a bit more since I don't think I have done enough damage yet. The LA-5 though isn't maneuvering a whole lot anymore and diving away, though still with a bit of a turn it slows him down. Now the BF-110 is not the best diver, but neither is the LA-5, and he took enough damage to eventually go down. So, having avenged our poor Heinkel 111, we go back to patrolling. Shortly after we meet another lone plane, a MiG-3 this time. My wingman saw it first and gave me its position. The MiG is flying straight and it is in a bit of a climb. It is just a little bit too fast for us, but I'm a bit higher than my wingman at this point and I can get a little bit closer, trading some altitude for speed. As I get closer I start to fire machine guns at long range, again hoping to make the MiG-3 turn. In a shallow dive the MiG-3 could outrun us, but we get lucky again. After firing a few more machine gun bursts, the MiG indeed starts to turn. It is also starting to dive down, but he keeps pulling the elevator, so I can stay with it as it does so. We are still getting pretty fast on the way down, and my plane's roll rate is starting to get very poor at this high speeds. Even the slide rolls of the MiG are hard to follow at this point, but luckily for me the enemy plane does not roll more than that and instead keeps up the not too tight turn. This relatively flat turn I can keep up with without too much trouble, and eventually as I close in get the lead on target to fire. I fire a burst and my shells hit the wings and eventually take it off. Now though I realize that I'm very low on fuel, I forgot that I only took the smallest fuel load. Luckily the airfield is close by, so I head there to land and rearm and get more fuel. My wingman, who has a bit more fuel, finishes off an IL-4 bomber that came in shortly after the MiG and then follows me to the airfield to rearm as well. And after doing so we head back out towards the city from the frontline airfield, which is pretty close to it. Here we can see some more planes at lower altitude and I dive down towards them. I can identify and engage another Yak that was fighting a BF-109. Shortly after this though I am having some trouble with my Shadowplay recording software again, and it crashes and stops working and I have to restart it to get it going again. Sadly, one larger fight was lost because of this. I shot down one more plane in that time, but then got shot down by 2 or 3 Yaks, so that was the end of this BF-110. Anyway, a bit after that I got my recording software back up and running and we are back in our BF-110s. We are coming from the direction of our airfield again after climbing a bit, and again there's a low altitude furball over the city. This area seems to be a bit of a hotspot with 2 frontline airfields close by. Anyway, I close in and fly over the fight, looking down to identify planes and look for targets. A lot of them seem to be BF-109s, not sure why they are so low, but that makes it easier for me to get above the fight. I spot a Yak after a few 109s which are after another Yak, and I roll around and dive after it. The Yak does not see me coming and I can line up a nice shot as I level out behind it and take it out quickly. And then I use my speed to go vertical above the fight to get a view of what is going on and get ready to bounce another plane. As I look down, I can see a lot of BF-109s chasing one target, but then two enemy fighters coming in behind them. So I come around to dive down on them. So is my wingman, and I announce that I go after the one with the green camo and my wingman picks the one with the white camo. The BF-109s eventually shoot down the yak they were chasing and start to disperse a bit, but the yak I'm closing in is starting to attack one of them. It takes me a bit to get close enough to engage. Luckily, maneuvering after the 109 slows the yak down a bit, so eventually I do get in fire range. I at first fire a deflection shot, again mostly hoping to get the yak's attention, keeping it from firing on the BF-109, and then a more aimed shot that takes the yak out. In the meantime, my wingman takes out the other plane with the white camo, an LA-5, and then we climb back up. It seems though those were the last enemy planes in the immediate area for now. My wingman and me start to climb over the area in a circle, a bit of a two-man version of a Luftbarrier circle or a rotary beam defense if you so want. As we climb, I have an eye on my wingman's plane and he on mine. If he gets attacked, I can turn towards him and the other way around as well. However, there are no enemy planes coming in to attack us as we gain altitude. Shortly after though, we can spot another lone plane flying straight towards us. It is coming from the direction of the enemy airfield, but at first I'm not sure if it is a BF-109 or an enemy plane that thinks he's getting an easy kill, as our twin-engine planes look all bomber-like from a distance. It is a yak, and as it passes I go vertical and my wingman turns after it. Now whatever the yak does, one of us can attack it. The yak turns and I dive down on it as it goes after my wingman, which is pulling up and then coming around towards the yak. The yak is also pulling up towards my wingman, and as I close in, I slot in behind it and fire a burst at close range that takes the yak out. And then we go back up to patrol over the city, keeping an eye out for enemy planes, which are often coming that way from the airfield on the other side of the river. And it doesn't take too long till I can see two more planes coming from that direction, at low altitude. Again, I'm not sure if they are attacking enemy planes or returning friendlies. I have to get closer to identify them, so I fly that way. My wingman checks out another contact a bit more to the north, but that one turns out to be friendly. So he comes back to form up with me again. Meanwhile, I got close enough to the two contacts over the river to identify them, and it turns out they're both enemy and friendly, a friendly BF-109 chased by an enemy fighter. The BF-110 of course can't outrun the enemy fighter, but luckily I am in a good position to help out. I pull the nose up a little bit and then come around in a slight high yo-yo turn and slot in behind the enemy fighter, a LA-5 as it turns out. I have enough speed from my dive down from altitude to catch up with them quickly, and just as they arrive over the city I start to engage the enemy fighter. With my second burst I get a good hit on the LA-5 and it goes down. And the BF-110 can return to base. I use the speed I built up in the attack to regain altitude fast. But as I do so, my wingman informs me that I have another plane coming directly towards me, though not identified as friend or foe yet. I spot the new arrival, and he is indeed coming directly at me, and I turn towards it to pick up speed again. I lose sight on the enemy plane for a second as I do so, and when I can reacquire it, the plane is firing, so it is definitely not friendly. I pull up as the plane a yak flies past me, but this time the yak is going into a split as after the attack and diving down. But my wingman catches him as he does so and sets him on fire in a deflection shot, and then follows the yak till it is clear that he is going down, while I cover him. At first we are not sure if the yak will really go down, but it is damaged enough and eventually goes down into the river, and me and my wingman form up again and go back to patrolling over said river while also climbing a bit. After forming up again, we start to move north up the river. There's another contact coming in towards us from the north, directly from the front, and my wingman dives on it while I cover this time, but this one turns out to be friendly. However, we can see some more planes further north and another teammate also calls for attention in this area, so we keep going in that direction. There seem to be a few planes fighting over the island in the middle of the river, and we plan to get above them. However, after a while I can see another plane coming in from my front and right, and at the first glance I misidentify it as an IL-2 from its silhouette, which does not worry me too much. I plan to pull up out of its line of fire and then go vertical. A maneuver which a heavy IL-2 will have trouble following. However, as the enemy plane comes in, it turns out that it is not an IL-2 after all, but a much more maneuverable Hurricane. I take a hit and the Hurricane gets behind me, so I have to start doing evasive maneuvers. I roll around to press the nose down and start to dive towards my wingman and build up some speed, and then I roll around again to present a more difficult target to the attacking Hurricane. Now my wingman is slotting in behind the Hurricane, and so are a few BF-109s, and I roll around again, and then after that turn around towards my wingman, which is firing at the Hurricane. But despite being fired upon and having a few planes behind it, the Hurricane is still coming at me and attacking. But after passing me again, he is getting pretty close now, so I pull my throttle back and go into a side slip to get the Hurricane to overshoot. The Hurricane is getting pretty close, but my wingman finishes it off before it overshoots me. However, right after shooting down the Hurricane, there are now two other enemy planes showing up behind my wingman and attacking, so I throttle back up again, redact the flaps and turn towards my wingman again. But here we have a bit of a miscommunication going on, so he is turning towards me also, and I can't slot in behind the attackers as I had planned. Though I think I at least started them somewhat, and one of the Yaks stalls and crashes, and the 109s are behind the other one. I turn around after the other one, but with my wings not looking so great anymore, I have to fight a bit to not take an unplanned pass in the river. The second Yak is coming towards me now, and I turn into its attack, and it passes me. And then I turn around again. The Yak is also turning around and getting attacked by my wingman from the front and the 109s from the rear, and it takes a few hits and is eventually going down. Now, with the Yak on fire and out of the fight, and my plane as well as my wingman's being shot full of holes and not flying so well anymore, we plan to fly back to base. As there seems to be no other enemy planes around for the moment, but just as we start to turn back home, there is another twin-engine plane coming in, and taking a closer look at it, it turns out to be a PE-2 that is going after the BF-109s that are going after the burning Yak. So we turn around to go after the PE-2. My wingman is behind it soon, but with my damaged engine I have trouble to keep up. And I start to fall behind pretty quickly, but as I look to my left and up, I can see another enemy plane attacking another friendly BF-110, so I point my nose that way and fly that way to assist. The enemy plane already took some damage though, and he is diving down. I plan to go after him when he passes in front of me, but the Yak is soon chased by a lot of BF-109s also, so I pull up a bit to get higher and cover them, though again I have trouble keeping up. Soon the damaged Yak is chased by 3 BF-109s and 1 BF-110s. Now, here's a bit of advice if I may. What you see here is what is generally called a lemming train, and you want to avoid that at all costs. If an enemy plane with a halfway decent armament, like an LA-5 for example, is diving down from behind here, and the pilot has some decent aim, he can get 4 easy kills before the one in front of the train knows what's going on. If you realize that there's a lemming train forming, get out, no matter if you're in the front or in the rear. Go up and escort the train. You get more kills that way, I guarantee you. Now, in the meantime, my wingman has finished off the PE-2, so we form up again to finally nurse our damaged planes back home to base, which is on the other side of the river. But it is not to be. As I look to the right, there is yet another enemy plane coming in and slotting in behind a BF-109, so we turn around to assist. My wingman is faster than me, and he goes for the first attack, though we are a bit too late to save the BF-109. The enemy plane is a Hurricane, and I fire a deflection shot at it at first, but I think I miss. Then my wingman goes in, but the Hurricane turns out of my wingman's way, so now it's my turn, and as the Hurricane tries to go after my wingman, I get a good shot at it. I line up the Hurricane and fire a burst, taking the Hurricane out. Now we can finally return to base, and this time we do so. We land and repair, and we go back out, but my shadow blade crashes again, and apparently Warzone did not like constantly tapping in and out of the game trying to restart it either, so it crashes too. Which is also why I don't have a replay of the fight. So, this is it for this fight. The final score for me, if you care, is 19-4. Well, flying the BF-10 out was a lot of fun. I hope we get more versions of this plane, as I think it is an interesting one. I also hope that the MA410 is getting its flight model fixed soon, as I want to cover that one as well, but not with its current flight model. Well, this is it for this video. As always, I hope it was entertaining, thanks for watching, and maybe I'll see you next time.